Jack Kerouac spent his life trying to keep pace with time. He believed, sometimes explicitly, sometimes by instinct, that if he moved fast enough, nothing he loved could disappear. If he stayed in motion, if he kept talking, writing, driving, typing, nothing would have time to die. He was wrong. Jack Kerouac is remembered less as a writer than as a posture. A look, a blur of highways, cigarettes, denim, jazz, and ecstatic motion. In the popular imagination, he is the poet of freedom, the man who broke loose from social gravity and never looked back. On the Road is treated as a celebration of youth, rebellion, and limitless possibility. Motion equals liberation. Speed equals truth. This reading is comforting. It is also incomplete, because beneath the mythology of freedom is a far more unsettling project. Kerouac was not ultimately interested in rebellion, travel, or counterculture for their own sake. Those were surfaces. What preoccupied him, quietly, obsessively, across his entire body of work, was time. Not time as history or chronology, but time as pressure. How it accelerates, how it fractures memory, and how consciousness behaves when lived faster than it can be understood. What Kerouac wrote, often without meaning to, was a record of what happens when experience begins to outrun reflection, when motion becomes a way of avoiding loss, when speed stops being liberation and starts becoming necessity. Seen this way, his work is not a manifesto of freedom at all. It is a sustained experiment in velocity, and it is an experiment that does not end in escape, but in exposure. The phrase spontaneous prose has obscured more than it has clarified. It is often taken to mean sloppiness, indiscipline, or an indifference to craft, the fantasy of inspiration unburdened by effort. This caricature makes Kerouac easy to dismiss. It is also wrong. Kerouac cared intensely about craft. He revised early drafts extensively, studied rhythm and structure, and worked deliberately to find forms capable of carrying what he wanted to record. What he opposed was not revision as such, but a particular kind of late-stage stylistic polish, revision that smoothed sentences for elegance, refinement, or literary approval after the fact. He believed that this kind of polishing introduced falsity, substituting hindsight for lived perception. His aspiration was not literally to transcribe consciousness as it occurs, an impossible task, but to get as close as possible to the felt movement of thought before it was reorganized into something safer or more coherent. Influenced by jazz improvisation, Catholic confession, and Buddhist meditation, he trained himself to write in long, breath-driven units, letting sentences stretch, accumulate, and buckle under the pressure of attention itself. Syntax loosens. Repetition becomes structural. Momentum carries meaning. The famous scroll of On the Road, taped sheets of paper fed continuously through a typewriter, was not a claim that revision was unnecessary. It was a physical strategy designed to remove interruptions once the writing phase began. Page breaks enforce pause. The scroll minimizes it. Writing becomes duration rather than arrangement. Kerouac planned obsessively. He outlined, reordered, renamed, and reconceived his material repeatedly. Spontaneity was not the absence of discipline. It was discipline shifted earlier in the process. Control happened before the sentence. The sentence was where he allowed risk. What he was attempting was not carelessness, but proximity, reducing the distance between living and recording as much as possible. That proximity gives his work its energy. It also generates its instability. Kerouac did not think in terms of individual novels. He imagined his writing as a single, lifelong autobiographical project, the Duluoz Legend, of which each book was a partial angle or moment. In this sense, His ambition aligns him more closely with Marcel Proust than with the popular image of the beat writer as a casual rebel. But where Proust slows time to recover memory, Kerouac accelerates time to keep pace with life as it rushes past him. His first novel, The Town and the City, already reveals his central anxiety. Written in a traditional, expansive style, it mourns the erosion of family, place, and continuity. Time is already experienced as loss. Memory is already under threat. The book is saturated with nostalgia and grief for forms of life that cannot be preserved. On the Road appears to reject this backward gaze entirely. Memory gives way to motion. The novel barely pauses. Episodes replace reflection. The prose surges forward as if stopping would mean something intolerable. Cars cross the continent. Encounters blur. Faces appear and vanish. The exhilaration is real. So is the unease beneath it. Movement in the novel is not simply chosen, it becomes increasingly necessary. The characters keep moving not only because the road promises freedom, but because stillness would force confrontation with exhaustion, with responsibility, with memory itself. Speed begins to function as anesthetic. This is where Kerouac is most often misread. Momentum is mistaken for joy. Velocity is confused with liberation. But On the Road is haunted by the suspicion that motion is not an escape from time, but a way of postponing reckoning with it. The Dharma Bums complicates this picture rather than simply reversing it. Influenced by Buddhism, friendship, and a genuine delight in community, the novel celebrates joy, shared labor, and moments of clarity. It is not merely a failed renunciation narrative. There is real warmth here, real laughter, real hope that a different relationship to time might be possible. And yet, even in its most peaceful moments, the prose remains restless. The sentences still rush. The self remains vividly present. Detachment is admired, but rarely sustained. Kerouac is drawn to Buddhist ideas of impermanence and release, but he cannot relinquish intensity. Catholic habits of guilt, suffering, and emotional immersion persist beneath the surface. The result is not synthesis, but oscillation. By the time of Big Sur, the experiment can no longer hold. The book is not about nature or retreat, despite its setting. It is about what happens when a mind habituated to velocity is forced into silence. Alone, famous, exhausted, and alcoholic, Kerouac finds that without motion, thought does not calm. It fragments. Time no longer flows forward. It circles, pounds, and echoes. Big Sur is one of the most unsparing acts of self-exposure in American literature. It dismantles the mythology of the beats from the inside. There is no wisdom waiting at the end of the road. Only exhaustion, paranoia, and the realization that speed, once used as protection, has become dependency. At the quiet center of Kerouac's work lies Visions of Gerard. It is not about rebellion or travel. It is about childhood and death, about the loss of his older brother, and the moment when time first revealed itself as destructive. Here the prose slows. Memory replaces motion. The writing becomes prayerful, careful, reverent. This book suggests what Kerouac was always reaching toward, not freedom, but preservation. Everything else, the travel, the breathless sentences, the refusal to stop, can be read as an attempt to keep loss at bay by never allowing anything to settle long enough to be taken away. Kerouac's ethical blind spots are real, but they require careful framing. His depictions of women and race reflect limitations of perspective, desire, and historical context. It is plausible, though not demonstrable, that his commitment to immediacy and speed contributed to these limitations by privileging impulse over reflection. What can be said with confidence is that his writing exposes how easily intensity displaces responsibility when experience is pursued faster than it can be examined. This does not absolve Kerouac. It situates him. His public life followed the same pattern as his art. After On the Road, he became a symbol he neither sought nor controlled. Media simplified him. Youth culture claimed him. Acceleration intensified. Alcohol filled the space where reflection might have lived. He did not adapt. He deteriorated. What makes Kerouac unusual is that he did not conceal this deterioration. He recorded it. He stripped his own legend of glamour and left the wreckage visible on the page. Big Sur is not a fall from grace. It is grace refusing to lie. Kerouac matters not because he predicted specific literary genres or named future movements, but because he articulated, through practice rather than theory, a problem that has only grown more acute. He showed what happens when life is lived faster than it can be metabolized. We now inhabit that condition. Experience accumulates without reflection. Memory is externalized and rarely revisited. Speed is praised as virtue. Slowness feels like failure. Stillness feels dangerous. Kerouac does not offer solutions. He offers testimony. He is not the poet of freedom. He is the tragic historian of immediacy, a writer who tried to preserve life by keeping pace with it and discovered that speed erases as surely as time. His legacy is not the road. It is the cost of never stopping. And the question he leaves us with is no longer literary. How fast can you live before you no longer recognize yourself moving through it? So let me ask you this. If Kerouac's greatest achievement was not liberation but exposure, what exactly did his books expose?